This is the third talk in a series on the facets of universal love, of the awakening heart. And we started with loving kindness, which is the response of the heart when we see the beauty and the mystery and the goodness that's here. And then the second was on forgiveness. On compassion. And we really emphasize self-compassion when we can really get the suffering within our own beings, the response of tenderness and care. So tonight we're going to be exploring forgiveness, which is the compassion that arises when we have we put up some sort of armoring of the heart, and the heart starts to melt when we begin to see the suffering in others. We forgive others when we begin to let ourselves feel the vulnerability that's there. So it's an all-important process in our evolution. And it's a universal one for all of us because our nervous systems are designed when we feel wounded, and we all get wounded, to tense up and create some sort of an armoring. So we're designed to do that. We're designed to be angry, and we're designed to try to protect ourselves from further hurt. It's all natural. And we also have this gift of having this awareness that can see how we're armoring and see where it's causing harm and begin to soften and open and let go. So forgiving is a part of our capacity, and really to fully wake up, to wake up beyond the separate defended egoic self. It's something that each of us is in some way exploring. And in the Buddhist tradition, forgiveness is considered the precursor to loving kindness. That your heart just can't be open and flowing with love if you're blaming and resentful and holding against others. So for that reason, I reflect on it often in my own life. I've created a lot of personal practices that have to do with sensing where I'm judging and creating separation. And I try to have it as a theme, as I'm sharing the practices with others. There's a anonymous quote I like a lot, which is, "Who is it that's unhappy? One that finds fault." And we know it. When we're in that fault-finding mode, we're not in a particularly upbeat space. I got an email last year that somebody described watching an improv group and how they were really wowed by how funny and spontaneous they were. And after the performance, they were able to meet the cast back in the background, and they're kind of a family group. I mean, they had that kind of family feeling. They really knew each other well. And they talked to people about the secret of their craft, of doing this improv. And they said, and that many of them mentioned that the key method was to, no matter what got thrown at them, to accept what was happening. So in other words, whatever another actor was saying or doing, no matter how wacky or confusing or left field or just off it felt, the trick was, instead of getting irritated or evaluating it or opposing it in some way, which is a kind of a rigid reaction, it's by really opening to it and going with it that they could respond in a way that was creative or funny or interesting or whatever. So the message was really simple. It's that when stuff comes at us, we can either get rigid and we're not going to have a very creative or intelligent response, or we can in some way yield, as with that breath that we just did, where we kind of just let it move through us, and then we find a way to move with it that really draws on our heart and our humor and our intelligence. So I liked that. I liked hearing about that because it's so easy for most of us to lock into the role, because we're all actors in a play, the role of the victim or the judge. I mean, I don't know many that don't know a flavor of that. I sometimes, somebody years ago sent me a bunch of Dear Abbeys, And these are the ones that she admitted she was at a loss to answer. So I just thought I'd share a few of them with you. Dear Abby, I'm a 23-year-old liberated woman who's been on the pill for 2 years. It's getting expensive, and I'm angry that my boyfriend hasn't been sharing the cost. I want to talk to him about it, but I don't know him well enough to discuss money with him. Dear Abby, I've suspected that my husband's been fooling around, and when confronted with the evidence, he denied everything and said it would never happen again. Dear Abby, my mother is mean and short-tempered. I think she's going through mental pause. Just one more. Dear Abby, I have a man I can't trust. He cheats so much, I'm not even sure the baby I'm carrying is his. That's a sleeper, right? So if we're honest with ourselves, the beginning, I think, sometimes of mindfulness, and I've seen this at retreats, is getting almost astonished, and not in a good way, at the degree of time we spend judging. Like how many moments in some way are flavored by and really contracted by judgment. It's just part of our daily trance that others are either an irritant or an obstacle in some way to what we want, or a disappointment in some way, or a threat. So often it's more subtle than that. Often there's just some sense that somebody's falling short, not meeting our standard. And it happens at work, and it happens with our closest people, happens in spiritual communities. There's a story of three Swiss monks of the Benedictine order, and they're meditating in the high Alps, and suddenly a milk cow walks by. The first monk says, this is Fritz's cow. I'm telling you, it's Fritz's cow. 2 hours later, the second monk says, no, really, that was Kurt's cow, I'm quite sure. Another 2 hours pass, and the third Swiss monk stands up. I'm going away, he's angry. I can't stand you guys having an argument around me when I'm trying to meditate. So we'll do a few reflections, and just so we can have a chance to make this a living practice. My intention always is for myself that I come away from a reflection with some more intentionality about noticing where judgment is creating separation from others. And so I want to invite you into that. And first you might close your eyes and just take a moment to just do a scan and see if you can do it with curiosity versus another level of judgment. You might sense the people of your life. Sometimes we think of it as concentric circles or whatever, but just maybe those closest in. And just let yourself, it's almost like you're letting your body review it. Just sense where you are carrying, in some way, a layer of judgment or resentment or blame. You might include, as you're scanning, those you work with or see very regularly. And you'll be able to feel it. See if you, as you scan, you can sense it's kind of a felt sense in the body of contraction, of distance. You can feel kind of distance, a pulling away from, a hardening. Perhaps extended family, friends. And you might extend it to perhaps those you don't know. Consider some of those that are in the political realm, And sense what happens when somebody disagrees. Somebody has a really different worldview. Somebody in power with a different worldview. There's a trance-like quality, a very habitual reflex when it comes to judging. Just to sense how quickly there's a storyline and we lock into who we are and who others are. So it's an integral part of the spiritual path for each of us to be having this inquiry of how do I create separation? Just to recognize. Now, if you'd like to open your eyes, please feel free. So forgiving is difficult. And the more injury, the more intense the injury, the more challenging it is. Because as I mentioned, it's very natural to build the armoring up, and there's a lot of fear of if we put down our armoring, we'll get hurt. And so I like very early on to say that, again, that the armoring and the anger that comes up in us is intelligent. It's part of our survival equipment. That the message here is not that getting angry is bad and is going to interfere with your spiritual unfolding. We have to know when we're endangered. We have to know when our needs are obstructed. And so it's like all animals. Anger physically mobilizes us to act. It immobilizes us to draw wise boundaries and to leave unhealthy relationships, distance ourselves, to leave the jobs that are in some way violating our ethics or our sense of who we are. In a political and social consciousness, it leads us to act, to try to protect the earth and to protect those that are getting abused or treated unjustly. So anger is an intelligent emotion. And when people have been violated or raped, feeling the sense of that anger and even a grudge for a while is actually a necessary way to restore a sense of well-being. In other words, we need to kind of strengthen our egoic self before we can really free ourselves. And when we've been violated, anger serves. And what happens when it just keeps going and going? This is the whole key point. It's the same with all the forms of stress, the fight, flight, freeze. It's like there's a purposefulness and an intelligence. And yet if it becomes our habit, so that we're always going around in that sense of fight and anger, so it just like triggered all the time, then the stories that are moving through our mind and the biochemistry that's flowing through our body is all going to be of the nature to contract us and close our hearts. So rather than a signal to take care, it just becomes a chronic habit. In one psychology journal, there was a picture of a dog seeing his therapist. He was lying on the couch, and he goes, "I bark at everything. You can't go wrong that way." It's kind of like that. So what motivates us to move towards forgiveness? And most people I know value the idea of forgiveness. There's that statement that everybody thinks forgiveness is a good idea until they actually have something to forgive, But most people value it because we intuit in a very deep way. There's an inner wisdom that recognizes that the habit of blame, the habit of intolerance, the habit of aggression hurts our body, it confines and narrows our mind, and it really keeps us unfree. Our spirit is unfree. So it's the same wisdom that sees the cycle of wars on our planet Earth and gets that we need dialogue and we need to kind of stay with what's really going on and we need to seek understanding. Well, we get that on a personal level until we're really caught in the clutches of feeling in some way injured, dissed, abused.